Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
Paradise. Paradise can mean many different things to many different people. Paradise to some is a quiet place for solitary reflection. For others, it's quite the opposite. For many, it's a Garden of Eden. Perhaps it's utopia. It can be the land of opportunity, rich in natural history, rich in human history. Many come to paradise to share the wonder. Many more come to learn of its wonders. Paradise can be a state of mind. For me, paradise is the state of Alabama. I'm Doug Phillips. Come along with me as we explore a paradise which truly is many things to many people. Come along as we discover Alabama's coastal paradise. This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama. Welcome to Discovering Alabama, and welcome to Alabama's coastal historical paradise. The idea that we can look back to see where we're going takes us deep into the history, the prehistory, and the natural history of this most remarkable place on planet Earth. Long, long before the first humans appeared in what would become the southeastern United States, powerful forces of geology were carving natural cradles for life on Earth. Today, we know those cradles as watersheds and river basins where fresh waters flow across a diversity of landscapes. Each stream, creek, and river contributes its own unique qualities to Alabama's coastal paradise as it seeks the salty waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It's easy to think of salty Gulf waters when considering the coast, but here where Mobile Bay meets the Gulf, one can get a sense of how fresh waters to the sea from across the state give character to Alabama's coastal paradise. The Mobile River Basin feeds Mobile Bay with a network of 7 major freshwater rivers: the Black Warrior, the Tombigbee, the Cahaba, Coosa, Tallapoosa, Alabama, and the Mobile.
Lower coastal plain rivers like the Fish, Magnolia, and the Bon Secours add to the special blend of fresh waters that make Mobile Bay unique. And to the east, the Perdido, Styx, and Blackwater rivers make their contributions to Alabama's coastal paradise.
Natural history brings so much together here at the coast that it's only natural for there to be a convergence of human history.
When the first humans appeared in North America, one can only wonder at what their notion of paradise might have been. If they had a word for heaven or nirvana or the promised land, I suspect they used it frequently when they discovered what we now know as the Alabama coast. The abundance of freshwater rivers would have attracted bountiful game for prehistoric hunter-gatherers. It would have provided rich alluvial soils for the first agriculturists. And it would have provided corridors of commerce for early entrepreneurs.
The Eastern Mississippian culture was here for thousands of years, but they were nomadic. They didn't stay here in the summertime because of both the mosquito population, I'm sure, and the potential of hurricanes. So they came down here usually in the late spring and stayed till the early fall, and they went back up north. But down here, they were also part of the mound building city-state culture, and they had the shell middens that are down on Fort Morgan Peninsula and the Bottle Creek Mound that's up in the Delta.
The Bottle Creek Indian Mounds were declared a National Historic Landmark in 1994. And to this day, archaeologists and anthropologists investigate the mysteries of the mound-building cultures of prehistory. The Spanish first entered Mobile Bay in the early 16th century and brought with them the written word, which is to say, the area crossed over from prehistoric to historic times.
When the Spanish came in, of course, from an exploration point of view, the Spanish were generally looking for wealth. And at that period of time, the Spanish basically claimed the world. So they claimed it, and they were out looking over the real estate. And so Pineda brought back reports. Then De Soto came in, and of course, De Soto was interested in more wealth. And he brought 600 mercenaries or conquistadors with him, and they did a lot of damage. But of course, they ended up just north of here, and the Great Battle of Mobila went on, where Tuscaloosa and several thousand warriors fought De Soto for 3 days. And that broke him as a fighting force. Then when they left, they didn't have a lot of interest because they hadn't found all of the riches that they were looking for. And at that time, you're talking about the oceans were the superhighways, the bays were the ramps off the superhighways, and then the rivers were the side, the roads that held you into the interior. So great advantage to have Mobile Bay.
The natural infrastructure that is Mobile Bay and its river system created a strategic importance that changed the Americas and the world.
Native tribes, the Spanish, the French, and the British all laid claim to this area at various times. And when the 13 colonies declared their independence, things began to get even more complicated. The Battle of Mobile, fought in 1781 between the British and the Spanish, was important in weakening the British hold on the Americas during the Revolutionary War. In 1812, the area became part of the Mississippi Territory. In 1813, the Fort Mims Massacre was a turning point in the Creek Indian Wars.
And then as people started coming in, the then indigenous natives, which became the Creek Confederation, divided into the White Sticks and the Red Sticks. The White Sticks basically said, let's try to work out our problems, because Mobile really is the melting pot, one of the great melting pots of America, from the Spanish and the French and all the people that came here. But the Red Sticks were the hardcore folks, little inland, and they massed and, of course, attacked Fort Mims in 1813 in August. And that was the largest Indian-led massacre in American history, which close to 500 people were massacred. Well, of course, the shock wave goes out through the country. Our national response can't come from Washington because we're basically in a huge imbroglio with Britain in the War of 1812. So that's where the Tennessee Volunteers come in.
The massacre at Fort Mims led directly to the involvement of the Tennessee Volunteers under the command of one of America's most famous, some would say infamous, characters, Andrew Jackson.
He came down and, of course, with Davy Crockett and a lot of other of those famous Indian fighters, and they routed the Creeks, and then they caught up with them at Horseshoe Bend, and Jackson basically reversed the massacre at Horseshoe Bend that was done at Fort Mims, came here, found the British were coming, and they literally were making a foray into the bay because that's the best place for them to land for New Orleans. So Jackson sends Captain Boyer down to the end of what is now known as the Fort Morgan Peninsula, and approximately where Fort Morgan is, built Fort Boyer. And he had a semicircle fort with lots of cannons, and they drove back the English frigates.
The history of Alabama's coastal paradise prior to statehood in 1819 is a fascinating tale of international conflict. After statehood, the conflicts would be more national in nature, but it would still be the nature of the area giving rise to that strategic importance.
You know, at the beginning of the cotton era, what you've got is this incredible networking of delta systems, all of which feeds into this rich soil that's perfect for growing cotton. So what initially was an inroad in conquest going north now became a socioeconomic empire of goods moving south. So Mobile becomes the Athens of the South.
The Cotton Kingdom that generated so much wealth did so on the backs of slaves. The Civil War that abolished slavery officially ended in 1865, and there's good reason to believe that the beginning of the end came in 1864, here at Fort Morgan.
In 1864, the Union had a grand strategy that was threefold. Grant was to defeat Lee and take Richmond. That was one of the objectives. It did not happen in 1864. The other was Sherman was to take Atlanta. That was still, the siege was underway when the Battle of Mobile Bay was going on. And the third objective was Farragut was to take Mobile Bay, one of the last great ports of the Confederacy. So Farragut got blocked at the entrance when he was coming in, and everything was bottlenecking. The Tecumseh hit a mine and went over and down within, they say, 2 minutes, taking 91 souls with her, and she's still there. So Farragut was bottled up when he made his momentous decision to go through the torpedo field, or the minefield. After he'd lost a 2,000-ton vessel, he made that decision. One of the great decisions of American naval history, by saying, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead, which he didn't say, by the way, but it's an apothegm. But when he made his decision to go through the minefield, he, in essence, made himself expendable. Because his goal wasn't to stay alive as much as it was to get inside the bay. And he went through and, of course, got in the bay, and that's when the Tennessee, who was firing rapidly on all the ships, decided to turn and attack the entire Union fleet. If Farragut had turned around and gone back, there were thousands of troops at Blakely that might have been free at that point to go to Atlanta. With Farragut in the bay, those troops had to stay put. Within 3 weeks of Mobile Bay, Atlanta fell. 2 of the goals.
The loss of Mobile Bay was the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. The Civil War and the Reconstruction politics that followed, some would say, are a legacy we're still trying to overcome.
History is such a paradoxical subject. At once there is so much to remember, and so much we wish we could forget.
Here at Fort Morgan, and indeed all of coastal Alabama, is a great place to consider where we've been as a state and as a nation. A great place to consider where we may be headed.
You cannot learn too much history. You cannot, I mean, the more you pull together the threads of history, the more you understand where history is going.
I must agree, you can't learn too much history if you want to know where you're going. Fortunately, the modern history of Alabama's coastal paradise has us going south for respite, rejuvenation, and re-energizing.
I'm proud to be on the Isle of Pleasure. It's Dixie's undiscovered treasure. In L.A., that's Lower Alabama, the Redneck Riviera.
The Redneck Riviera comes from a song, at least it's the first time you heard it commercially, by a man by the name of, who was known as Shine, who had a bar over in the Orange Beach area. He was kind of a vagabond entrepreneur, and he recorded a song called the Redneck Riviera.
Treat you right. It's country jams and thank you ma'ams for the dune buggy moonlit night. It's sun-bleached hair and folks that care about an easy laid-back scene. In the sands of L.A., we're not in California, but it's where we like to play.
The first time it got a lot of play was in an article that Howell Raines wrote for the New York Times about Kenny Stabler and Richard Tard playing down on the Redneck Riviera. And it's nice little alliteration, and it's sort of accurate, at least it was for a while.
My friend Hardy Jackson is a well-respected historian who does a remarkable job of finding the character of a place in the character of its people. And among the people, the characters of Alabama's coastal paradise, there are many perspectives.
Well, let me tell you about the Redneck Riviera. I know Hardy Jackson and think a lot of him and his work. I really welcome and embrace Hardy's perception of our history in that way. At the same time, I know that Hardy embraced and welcomed my novel, Chicken Dreaming Corn, about all of these newcomers from all over the world to downtown Mobile, and some of the essays that I have written about this place that really come from a different perspective. And these cultural and ethnic and racial and linguistic and, and artistic expressions in all kinds of different ways, this diversity is what draws me. I feel closer to the Gulf Coast hearing the Lord's Prayer in 4 different languages at that little Greek Orthodox church when I'm there as a visitor than I do when I'm necessarily listening to, some country, southern rock band play music down at the beach. I mean, I enjoy that. It's fun, but there's a lot else that goes on here too. And I want people to know that. And that speaks to people when they spend a little time here and look beneath the surface.
By all means, everyone is welcome here. And, the fact that we're called the Redneck Riviera, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with it. It's good because, embracing that and at the same time, bringing to this area things that people normally would have to travel to find. I think one of the biggest compliments we get is they say thank you.
The Gulf Coast, I think it's a place that is real, It's a place that has an identity and a sense of place, and water is a key component of that. And so, you know, and that means different things to different people. It means beaches and recreation to some people. It means aesthetic beauty to some people. That's one of the things I like most about being here. You know, I can look out my back door and see scenery like this marsh that you see, and it just, I feel my blood pressure go down as I look at it. You know, it's just an easy, beautiful place to live in.
There are many different perspectives on Alabama's coastal paradise. One shared perspective, though, this is a great place for a great meal.
Being in the restaurant business and caring about what I serve, it's real important for me to be able to get good seafood, and especially if you're going to live in Alabama and lower Alabama. But I can tell you with a lot of confidence right now that I feel better now than ever about the seafood that we're getting from the Alabama seafood system. And the fact that the state has done a really good job down there. We've got some of the best seafood out there, and it's really advantageous to us to be able to take advantage of that.
Mobile and Baldwin County are two of our more important counties, and one reason is they are Alabama's only two seafood producing counties. We test for food safety from the Gulf, and that has gone unbelievably well, and we've had no problem whatsoever with anything to do with our Gulf seafood.
Part of the luxury of being able to have a restaurant here right on the Gulf Coast is, you know, and while we do have our challenges of you know, finding as much seafood as we would like, I don't want to sound greedy, but the stuff that we do get is absolutely amazing. I mean, we will get these amazing, you know, freshly caught cobia and mahi and big grouper, and a couple hours later delivering it to the table and just seeing the expressions and having people tell you that it is literally the best dish they've ever had in their life is pretty rewarding. And it's because the quality of this seafood is unmatched. It is, I mean, we are in a very, very lucky spot to have this bounty here.
A very, very lucky spot indeed. It is, after all, Alabama's coastal paradise.
For some, it is Alabama's ecological coastal paradise. For others, Alabama's educational coastal paradise. Historical, cultural, recreational, culinary, literary, artistic. Some of us find wild wonders along the beach.
And some of us enjoy our wild wonders in a little different setting, just off the beach. Across time, across a myriad of settings, Alabama's coastal paradise continues to be many wondrous things for our state, for our nation, and our world.
Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the University of Alabama. This program is supported by grants from the Solon and Martha Dixon Foundation, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935, and the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division.